I walked in poor in your eyes, and I walk out richer than all of you.
4 days before my wedding, my fiance's wealthy father, Harold Blackwell, shoved a prenup in my face, smirking like he'd already won. I won't let a poor man like you steal my daughter's money. What they didn't know was that I had $29 million, my own lawyer, and a plan that would wipe those smug grins clean. You know that feeling when you walk into a fancy restaurant and the hostess gives you that look? Multiply it by 1,000, add generations of wealth and arrogance, and you've got Tuesday afternoon in the Blackwell drawing room. I sat in a leather chair worth more than most cars, staring at financial warfare dressed up as family concern. Harold, Charleston's answer to Gordon Gekko, slid a prenup across a mahogany table thicker than a Stephen King novel. His voice carried that heavy condescension only inherited money seems to create. He lifted his crystal tumbler of outrageously expensive brandy and took a sip that screamed, "Checkmate, peasant." Beside him, my fiancée Isabel sat like a porcelain doll, perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the Persian rug. The woman I planned to marry couldn't look me in the eye while her father tried to cut me down. Margaret, Isabel's mother, perched in Chanel like a vulture, lips pursed in what might have been judgment or simply her resting rich face. Take your time reading through it, Harold went on, in a tone that suggested the exact opposite. Though I'm sure a man of your background will find the language straightforward enough. That pause before background was heavy with disdain. The thing about assumptions is that they trip people up, especially those who believe they've covered every angle. Harold thought he was playing chess while I was stuck with checkers. He saw what he wanted to see. A blue-collar nobody who got lucky with his daughter and was trying to climb into high society using her trust fund. What he didn't know was that I wasn't the struggling mechanic's son they imagined. Sure, I started there, but while the Blackwells sipped champagne at charity galas, I was building something real. $29 million, that's what my accountant said my net worth was, and it kept growing. Investment properties across 3 states, a private equity firm quietly crushing it, and enough liquid assets to make Harold's brandy budget look like spare change. I came from nothing. Dad ran Mitchell's Auto Repair on the wrong side of Savannah, a grimy slice of heaven that smelled like oil, disappointment, and working-class dreams. The shop had 3 chairs in the waiting room, 2 wobbling like drunk college kids, and a coffee maker older than me. Dad's hands were permanently stained black under the nails, worn like badges of honor because that's what real work looked like. A son, he'd tell me as I passed him wrenches older than some classmates, there are 2 kinds of people in this world, those who work for money and those who make money work for them. We're the first kind, but that doesn't mean we can't learn to be the second. Mom taught middle school math at Jefferson Middle, the kind of place where underfunded was being polite and miracle described any kid who graduated knowing. Multiplication tables. She'd come home with stories of 12-year-olds who couldn't afford lunch but solved equations that stumped kids from better schools. Our vacations were day trips to free museums downtown. My sneakers were knockoffs that lasted 6 months before falling apart. But growing up, poor teaches lessons no trust fund can buy. Every dollar matters, nothing is handed to you, and if you want something, you fight for it. High school was grinding time. While classmates figured out how to sneak beer into football games, I worked nights at Murphy's Grocery, stocking shelves from 6 to midnight. Minimum wage, sometimes tips, saved every penny while others blew theirs on movies and mall food. The scholarship to Columbia came through endless hours of study and an essay about hardship that made the admissions committee tear up. Full ride, tuition, room, board, everything. When the acceptance letter came, Mom cried so hard she had to sit on the kitchen floor. Dad just nodded. Knew you had it in you, son. College was pure culture shock. A scrappy kid from Savannah with 2 pairs of jeans and a work ethic strong enough to power a city, thrown in with kids who thought roughing it meant staying in a 3-star hotel instead of 5. They spoke casually about spring break in Europe, complained about their allowance being cut from $2,000 to $1,500 a month, and still managed to make me feel both small and oddly grateful at the same time. Dorm room conversations were surreal. My roommate once complained for an hour because his parents were only buying him a BMW instead of the Mercedes he wanted. Meanwhile, I was figuring out if I could afford both textbooks and groceries that week. Their monthly allowances could have covered my family's rent for 3 months. While they networked at fraternity mixers and leaned on Daddy's country club ties, I was in the library studying real estate law, market trends, and investment strategy. While they slept off hangovers from parties I couldn't afford, I analyzed housing markets and found undervalued properties in neighborhoods that felt like home. Laura Kessler was one of the few who understood. Future lawyer, sharp as a blade, the kind of friend who'd help you bury a body without asking why. She came from money, maybe not Blackwell wealth, but enough to see both privilege and grit. Laura noticed what I was building when it was still just spreadsheets and late-night plans. "You're not just smart," she told me sophomore year. "You're hungry smart. That's dangerous." She meant it as praise. By graduation, I'd flipped 3 properties and had the capital to aim higher. While classmates polished resumes and begged corporations to hire them, I was taking calculated risks and laying the foundation for an empire. I met Isabel at a charity art auction in Charleston. She stood in front of a splatter of abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed on canvas, stunning in that effortless way that comes from stylists. The Gallery Meridian was the kind of place where champagne cost more than most people's groceries, and art was priced like liquid gold. "Not a fan of abstract expressionism?" she asked, her southern accent warm but not condescending. We talked for an hour, and she seemed different. She hated the pretension, said it was all for show. Everyone's just competing to out-charity each other. Half don't care about the cause. She worked at a nonprofit for education funding and spoke with real conviction. "Throwing money at problems doesn't fix them," she said. "You have to understand them. Get your hands dirty." I was hooked. Here was a woman from a world I'd only seen in movies, talking about real work and real problems. Our first date was at a small Italian place she picked. Big portions, family recipes, food that felt human. She loved that I'd worked for everything I had. Said most men she met had never worked a day in their lives. Over months, she introduced me to her world. Yacht weekends where boats were bigger than houses, charity galas and ballrooms that belonged in Versailles, brunches on manicured lawns where perfectly dressed people discussed meaningless topics. But Isabel seemed above the nonsense, rolling her eyes at pretentious conversations. Harold emerged as the patriarch, shrewd businessman who'd turned inherited money into serious money through real estate and strategic investments. He had confidence that comes from never being wrong about anything important. Margaret was icy politeness wrapped in pearls and passive aggression, perfecting backhanded compliments. Preston, Isabel's brother, was the poster child for inherited privilege, opinions about everything, experience with nothing. Around month 3, cracks started showing. The Blackwells' friendliness had the depth of politicians' promises, paper-thin politeness that could be shredded with the slightest provocation. Margaret was the queen of passive-aggressive warfare, turning subtle insults into an art form that would have impressed psychological warfare experts. During one dinner at their mansion, and when I say mansion, I mean the kind of place with a room specifically for arranging flowers, she delivered subtle character assassination with surgical precision. "It's really admirable how hard you've worked to get where you are," she said, cutting her filet mignon like she was performing surgery, voice dripping with sweetness that immediately made you check for hidden knives. "Most men from your background would have settled for so much less." The way she emphasized background and settled made her meaning crystal clear. Harold preferred disguising insults as business advice. "The investment game is tricky. Takes years to understand the nuances. I'd hate to see you get in over your head." But Preston was casual cruelty disguised as brotherly humor. The turning point came during casual family dinner when he said, "Better make sure you don't gamble away my sister's future," twirling his wine glass with that rich kid smirk perfected by age 10. Harold chuckled appreciatively. Margaret gave token scolding that secretly approved. "And Isabel?" She laughed. Not shocked, not embarrassed. She actually laughed that nervous giggle people do when choosing self-preservation over loyalty. That laugh hit like a punch to the gut. Isabel wasn't some rebel princess fighting family values. She was their perfectly programmed daughter playing a role to make me feel special. The "I hate this pretentious world" act was just that, an act. 2 weeks before the wedding, Harold started fishing for information with transparent phone calls that had all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "Just checking in," he'd say with fake warmth, like he'd suddenly developed passionate interest in flower arrangements and seating charts. "Business treating you well? The economy's unpredictable." Must be challenging for someone in your sector. My sector? Like I was running a hot dog cart instead of a multi-million-dollar investment firm. But I played along, giving him just enough information to keep him talking while revealing absolutely nothing of value. It was like watching a hunter circle its prey, except the hunter was wearing an expensive suit and sipping brandy that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. The questions got more specific with each call. How diversified was my portfolio? What was my exposure to market volatility? Did I have adequate liquidity for unexpected expenses? It was like being interrogated by the world's most persistent financial advisor, except this advisor was trying to prove I was broke instead of trying to make me rich. Meanwhile, Isabel parroted Harold's lines about merging finances for simplicity and transparency. Financial transparency builds trust, she'd say. Don't you want us to be a real team? This wasn't her idea. This was Harold's strategy executed through his trained daughter. When Harold slid that prenup across his table, I knew it would be ugly. The document was bound in leather that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, printed on paper so thick you could use it as body armor. This wasn't just a legal contract. It was a declaration of war disguised as wedding paperwork. Every clause a carefully crafted missile designed to blow my financial independence to smithereens. The document was financial waterboarding at its finest. Clause 4.1 stated in language precise enough to be carved in stone that any assets acquired during marriage would become Isabel's sole property. Not joint property, not shared assets, not even a 50-50th split. Everything would belong to her, period. Think about that. Any business growth, investment gains, property purchases during our marriage would automatically become hers simply because we happened to be married when I earned it. But the real masterpiece was buried in fine print, a clause making any money I invested in Blackwell Family Ventures non-recoverable even in divorce. So if Harold convinced me to partner on some can't-miss real estate deal, my investment would become part of the Blackwell empire forever, regardless of what happened to our marriage. It was elegant in its cruelty, sophisticated in its greed, and absolutely breathtaking in its complete disregard for anything resembling fairness. This is pretty comprehensive, I said. Harold waved dismissively. Standard stuff. Just protecting everyone's interests. Margaret added fake sympathy about family money being complicated, but Isabel's reaction drove the knife home. You knew about this? I asked. She looked up with resigned acceptance. It's just paperwork. Like my financial independence was some minor detail swept away with a signature. That night, I drove to my real home, the $3 million penthouse downtown that nobody in the Blackwell family knew existed. I'd kept it quiet because growing up poor teaches you to keep cards close to your chest. I called Laura. I need you to lock down everything. Within hours, my entire financial empire disappeared from Harold's reach. Assets moved into irrevocable trusts, properties transferred to LLCs, liquid assets converted to bearer bonds in Cayman accounts. Everything slid behind legal barriers that would take Harvard lawyers years to penetrate. Then I made the call that would turn Harold's wedding day into a nightmare. I told the wedding planner to mark me down as attending the ceremony, as a guest, not the groom. The morning of what was supposed to be my wedding, I chose my outfit carefully. Instead of the custom tuxedo Isabel insisted I order, I wore my navy suit from Men's Warehouse, respectable but clearly off the rack. Because today I wasn't the groom. Today I was just another guest who allegedly couldn't afford the real thing. Walking down the aisle as a guest, heads turned. Whispered conversations erupted like a Greek chorus of confusion. Margaret spotted me first, face draining when she saw my off-the-rack suit. Harold marched toward me, face cycling through confusion, anger, panic. "What is this?" he hissed. "What are you doing?" I pulled out the unsigned prenup and said loud enough for nearby pews. "You said sign it or no wedding. I didn't sign it." The gasps were audible. Charleston's finest realized they were witnessing social apocalypse. Harold's face went purple. "You'll walk away with nothing." That's when I played my ace. I pulled out Forbes magazine with my face on the cover, The Southeast's Quiet Mogul, How One Man Built $29 Million from Scratch. The silence was deafening. Harold stared at the magazine, brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The poor man he'd tried to financially destroy was worth more than he'd probably see in his lifetime. $29 million, I said conversationally. That's just what they could verify. The real number's higher. Preston looked like someone had told him Santa was real and he'd been naughty his whole life. Margaret gripped the pew, pale as death. Isabel, standing at the altar in her expensive dress, looked like the ground had been pulled from under her feet. This can't be right, Preston stammered. You're poor. You work in a garage. I laughed out loud. I haven't worked in a garage since I was 16. I own an investment firm managing over $200 million in assets. Your dad spent months trying to figure out my net worth, and apparently his research skills aren't as sharp as his reputation suggested. Margaret whispered about my little condo and regular car. I cheerfully explained about my downtown penthouse and investment portfolio. Turns out you don't have to flaunt wealth to actually have it. Isabel found her voice. You knew this whole time? You let us treat you like a charity case, I finished. Like some broke mechanic's son who should be grateful for marrying into Charleston royalty. Yeah, I wanted to see exactly how ugly you people could get when you thought you were dealing with someone beneath your station. Harold croaked that he'd had me investigated. You saw mechanic's son and stopped investigating. Classic rich person mistake, assuming anyone with dirt under their fingernails couldn't play in your league, Preston whimpered. But why didn't you tell us? I looked around the church at shocked faces, savoring their collective humiliation. Because this is so much more satisfying than just writing you a check. I walked toward the exit, leaving Charleston's finest staring at smoking ruins of their assumptions about social hierarchy. The Blackwells wanted to play financial games with someone they thought was beneath them. Turns out they'd picked a fight with someone so far above them they couldn't even see him from where they were standing. The drive back to my penthouse felt like freedom. My phone buzzed with desperate calls, Isabel apologizing, Harold offering to renegotiate, Margaret claiming I'd humiliated the family. I deleted every message without reading them. From my balcony overlooking Charleston Harbor, I could see St. Philip's Church spire where the Blackwells were probably still explaining to guests why the groom had blown up their daughter's wedding with a Forbes magazine and truth bomb about their investigative incompetence. I'd lost a fiancé today, but kept something more valuable. My dignity, freedom, and fortune. The Blackwells wanted to own me, control me, reduce me to a manageable family asset. Instead, I'd owned the moment, controlled the narrative, and reduced their assumptions to smoking ruins. Honestly, that felt like the best trade I'd ever made.